18 days left for Kamala Harris and Donald Trump to rally voters.
You better remember I'm here, and she's not. I could have done that too.
Thou shalt not bear false witness to thy neighbor.
Indeed, especially thy neighbor's election results.
Will you commit now to respecting and encouraging a peaceful transfer of power?
Well, you had a peaceful transfer of power.
The American people are exhausted with this gaslighting. Exhausted.
Critics say your tariffs will end up being like a national sales tax.
No.
He thinks that China pays for them. This is the same guy who also thought that Mexico would pay for the wall. So there's no risk.
I think the bigger problem is the enemy from within.
Donald Trump is running a straightforwardly fascist campaign.
He refuses to release his medical records.
Watch his rallies. He's confused. He's a nearly 80-year-old man. He's ranting and rambling. It's fun to stay at the YMCA. It's fun to stay.
She's done a lot more to take questions than he has lately.
It is not supposed to be a cakewalk.
So are they misguided, the 50%?
Listen,
are they stupid? What is it?
I would never say that about the American people.
You talk about unstable. She's a whack job.
Enough! We are ready to turn the page!
Good evening once again, and welcome to the Nightcap. I am Stephanie Ruhle, and we are now just 18 days away from the election, and the race for the White House seems to be in a dead heat. In these final days, both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are racing around the country, especially to battleground states, looking to fire up supporters and win over those still mysteriously undecided voters. But that does not mean they're taking the same approach. Kamala Harris held rallies and sat for one-on-one interview, one after another, from Fox News to Charlemagne the God. Donald Trump, on the other hand, canceled or postponed several interviews and attended town halls, including one that was packed with his supporters. And let us not forget another one that turned into a 39-minute dance party to his playlist that ended with the song Memory from the 1980s musical Cats. With that, let's bring in our Nightcap crew. Philip Bump is here, Washington Post national columnist. Nancy Giles, Emmy-winning contributor to CBS News Sunday Morning. Paul Rykoff, founder of the Independent Veterans of America and host of the Independent Americans podcast. And Samantha Barry, making her debut appearance on the Nightcap, editor-in-chief of Glamour magazine. All right, welcome to you all. I want to start with the week. Kamala Harris seems that this media blitz she's been on over the last month, every week has a new theme, right? I sat down with her doing her economy week. Then she had a week where she was focused on women, when she spoke to Call Her Daddy. This week she was focused on black men in America with Charlemagne the God. What are your thoughts on this new, you can no longer say she's avoiding the media. What do you think about what she's doing?
You know, it's interesting. At Glamour, we looked at the unwavering black woman voter, right? If you're a black woman voter in America, you're 98% likely to vote for the Democrats. The same can't be said, at least in what we've seen in recent polls, for black men. And you've seen this push. You saw it a week ago when former President Obama asked black men to vote for Kamala. And you've seen it really, really considered this week with her media strategy, including she's going on those shows like The Shade Room. She's really appealing to black male voters, but she's also, when she's on mainstream media like the Howard Stern show, she's mentioning that she's a Lewis Hamilton fan, and she's really, so there's the media blitz, but there's also the opportunity agenda for black men, which she, and I agree with you, it's a weekly drive. I'm interested to see what next week's drive is going to be for her.
What's your thought?
She's good at this. I think that's the takeaway. She's good at this. She's kind of a multi-sport athlete. She can go into different places and do well. And I think it's in contrast to Trump, who had that weird dance fest that makes everybody cringy, right? And I think she should press that advantage. Every time she tries a new area, she seems to do well, and she's tough. I think that's the key differentiator here. She can show that she's tough, and he's volatile, he's unstable, he's weak, he's a threat to national security. Now she's focusing on men, and I think that's where she needs to stay, because she's struggling, especially with non-college educated white men, independents in places like Pennsylvania, and I think that's going to be the key. She's got the two-pronged strategy of turning out voters, but she's got to get those moderates and shave away some moderate Republicans.
But these reports that she's slipping, or the Democratic Party is starting to slip with black male voters, where do you think this is coming from? Why is it?
I don't know, and I cringe when I hear those things. For starters, black voters, male and female, they're not monolithic. And I also think that what she's doing that's so smart is not only reaching out to men. I think you're right. I mean, being on Howard Stern was great. Charlemagne the God, that gets, checks that box.
And Charlemagne was hugely critical of President Biden, hugely critical.
He was.
So it's not like...
It wasn't a softball interview, not at all. But today she did a great interview with union people, you know, union members, and keeps underscoring the differences between working class people and a rich guy who was handed $400 million and went bankrupt 6 times. So I love the fact that she's dipping all over the place. I think it's great.
She put her head in the mouth of the lion and went on Fox News. I want to know, Philip, what was your take? And I also want to know, how did Fox News speak about it after? Because before the interview, their entire narrative all day, every day, was that she was only doing softball interviews, easy interviews. She was never stepping up to the plate. She stepped up to the plate, and how is it taken over on their field?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Fox News is obviously a right-wing media organization, and so, yeah, I hate to spoil it for everyone.
Oh, my God.
But, you know, so she goes in there, and we've seen them do this before, but she sits on for the interview with Bret Baier. It's contentious. You know, I think he's sort of gotten somewhat of a bad rap. He had a fairly contentious interview with Trump in June of 2023 as well. I think that's worth noting. But what happens when you go on Fox instantaneously? He's followed by Laura Ingraham and Jesse Waters and Sean Hannity. What they do is they take little pieces of the interview and then they just dump on it. And they spend the entire hour, they invite guests in, and all they do is say, here's why this was terrible. And so you get this half-hour interview in which Kamala Harris is trying to talk to these voters who might be watching Fox News, who may be sort of like, I don't love Trump, and I don't really know how I feel about Harris. And the people to whom she is trying to appeal with her, you know, Liz Cheney likes me, like republicanism outreach, right? So you do that for half an hour, and then you have 3 hours of Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity and Jesse Waters just saying the worst, most obnoxious and false.
But they're going to crush her no matter what.
Yeah, 100%.
And think about this. Think about the woman, the woman who watches Fox News, right? My mother, the Louise Ruhle who watches Fox News. And she's watching Kamala Harris and says, well, Donald Trump said Kamala Harris is so stupid. She's not that stupid. But Donald Trump says Kamala Harris is so weak. She's not so weak. So there are a portion of those voters out there, those Fox News voters, who might not like Kamala Harris's policies, but they're going to watch that interview and at least say, well, she's not how Donald Trump described her at all.
Exactly, and they're going to get bits of information that they've never gotten before because Fox doesn't go into those pieces of information. Also, I got to say, I was amazed that Bret Baier actually addressed her as Madam Vice President. He was so hostile compared to how he was when he interviewed Trump. He was like very, very respectful, and he interrupted her.
But shouldn't he call her Madam Vice President?
Yeah, he should. But I was surprised that he did because he was so disrespectful otherwise. He interrupted her 38 times in 27 minutes. 38 times. And for women that might be watching, they're going to be like, you know, I know what that's like. I know what it's like to be silenced and to be interrupted. And I think that might go somewhere.
Is there a hope that maybe it's a Fox News house and there's somebody that watches Fox News that is never going to not vote for Trump, but there's other people tuning in and catching this, whether it's a daughter or son or somebody? Is that the hope in going to the Fox audience, that you're getting the whole household, not just the diehard Fox News fan?
Or do you think this puts Donald Trump in a corner, right? However she was going to do, win, lose, or draw, this puts Donald Trump in a corner, right? That they were saying she's junior varsity, she's weak, she can't do it. As I said, she now put her head in the mouth of the lion while Donald Trump sat home or just talked to his friends. Does this not put pressure on him to do something with a non-friendly audience?
But he keeps cancelling, right? I mean,
he's exhausted.
He's cancelling.
But she's pressing her advantage, right? She's putting the pressure on him, and I think that's what she should continue to do, to out-tough him, to be aggressive. She's calling him out. She's saying he's wimpy. He won't debate her. And the further she goes into enemy territory, she continues to show she's tough. And that's what she's got to show those persuadable voters. Not everybody who watches Fox News is stupid. Fox News plays in places like the military bases, right? And a lot of folks are watching it saying, you know, she's not as bad as I thought. I don't like that guy, and I don't like her, but she's better than him. And that's the contrast she has to continue to push. She doesn't have to sell him that she's the greatest on earth. She just has to show she's less bad than him.
And that she wants to appeal to everybody. She's not just going for her quote-unquote base. She's really putting herself out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to remember the context here, which is that this race is even, right? And so Donald Trump doesn't have to do this because he has this base of support. He's run for president twice before. He has this base of support, 47% of the electorate, who's going to come out and vote for him, right? And he feels confident in that. And Republicans and older voters tend to vote more frequently and consistently anyway. Kamala Harris isn't in that position. And so all of these things that we're talking about, the outrage of Charlamagne God, all these various things are her trying to convince people that it's worth taking the time to go vote, right? And so if you can get some of those Republicans, some of those generally skeptical Republicans, if you can get a few of them to come out and vote, yeah. Do I think this was on net useful? No, I don't. I disagree. I don't think it was terribly useful because, you know, those people that watched it then watched Laura Ingraham and so on and so forth. You know,
yes, but I do think though all over the place, right?
Yeah, I understand. There are clips and so on. That's fair.
And to anyone, you know, we keep hearing, you know, she speaks a word salad. She gave non-answers. Even if you don't like what her answers are, she's actually answering the questions. Earlier this week, when Donald Trump spoke at the Economic Club of Chicago to John Micklethwaite from Bloomberg, he was asked repeatedly, do you think Google should break up?
Right.
His answer was about voter rolls in Virginia. So you can tell me that you don't like that Kamala Harris uses the word.
Don't make me defend
Trump. I'm saying to you.
Okay.
We could say that, you know, oh, what does it mean when Kamala Harris talks about holistic economy? You might not like her word choices, but she's actually answering the question. Because I'm pretty sure whether or not Google breaks up has nothing to do with undocumented immigrants voting in Virginia.
I know. The answer to everything is not undocumented immigrants. It's just not. And she just is reaching all kinds of people and showing that she's not a moron. I mean, the names he calls her. He's always talking about her lack of intelligence. Stop it.
But it's also, I think people have been waiting for policy from her. I think if you were talking about a month ago, a lot of the questions were like, I don't know what she stands for. I don't know what her... She is doing a blitz, and she's talking about reproductive rights. She's talking about an agenda for black men. She is getting her policy out in lots of different places.
And she's talking about taxes. She's a Democrat saying, I will lower your taxes. And I think the taxes, toughness, I've talked about this before. Another T is Tim Walz, using him strategically. That's how you move independents, unaffiliated. 51% of this country is unaffiliated, not Democrat, not Republican. And they want to hear taxes. They want to hear the border. They want to hear national security. And they want to hear how you're going to make their life better. And she's proving her case and going everywhere, any day, and showing she can handle it. And I think that's what she's got to continue to do. Show she can be commander-in-chief and she can handle the fire.
I mean, with respect, 51% of the 40% of, you know, the country votes with a party anyway, right?
Because they don't have a choice.
Well, no, that's not true. No,
it's absolutely true.
No, the leaning.
When did you have an option to vote for an independent in a recent election?
Well, that's not what they do. Independent voters.
That is the point.
They consistently vote with one party or the other.
Because they don't have an option.
Well, I mean, perhaps, but...
No, absolutely.
No, I mean, look...
What independent option do they have in this election?
Well, they have Jill Stein, if you want me to...
Okay.
There are not a lot of people who are actually sitting down and undecided between these voters. It is not the case that 50% of the country is looking at them being like, well, I'm not sure between Kamala and Trump. I know that's not what you're saying, but my point is there are not that many people who actually exist in this liminal space between the two parties. Most independents consistently vote with one party. If you say it's because there aren't other options, fine. You can say it's not other options, but they still are in that habit of doing that, of voting for Democrats and voting for Republicans. They tend to vote.
But they're also...
But they're not sitting back, and polling showed it's not that the undecided voters are sitting back and waiting to hear more information about policies. These are the least engaged political actors and the people who pay the least attention. They are not the ones who are drilling in the deepest on policy.
Here's my question. There's been tons of noise this week. Donald Trump last night spoke at the Al Smith dinner. This is a Catholic Charities dinner that has existed for 79 years. Until last night, both candidates would show up, people from both parties, and it is a big, fancy, muckety-muck New York dinner, so you could easily make the argument she needs to be in battleground states. People around the country don't care. But do you think there was an opportunity, right? I would argue that Kamala Harris's best day, best night of her campaign was on the debate stage, where she stood next to Donald Trump. So the argument that she's weak and she can't find her voice, that goes out the window. And that may have been her last opportunity to stand in a room shoulder to shoulder to him. And yes, it's a room of New Yorkers who most likely know exactly who they're going to vote for. But that dinner, those comments are all over the country today. Do you think there's a missed opportunity that she could have shown America yet again, right? Because she's arguing right now, this guy's missed a step. You worried about Joe Biden's age? Worried about his age. Worried about his 39-minute dance party. Question why he's canceling all these events. So while she's saying, I want to see his medical records, was that a chance to say, here I am standing tall and confident, and look at this guy snoozing over his Diet Coke?
It was. You're absolutely right, because she's great when it's side by side like that. But I will say this, more and more at her rallies, she's showing video of him. It's not the same as standing in the same room with him, but boy, is there a contrast with him sort of slobbering and not making much sense or calling us, enemies of the people.
Enemy within.
Enemy within, yes. I mean, those contrasts are there. But yes, you're right. I initially thought she doesn't need to be there. I mean, I had some issues with the Al Smith dinner and honoring a guy that's thrice married, an adulterer, wanted to take down the country, stuff like that. Maybe. Yeah. Partly problematic. As a Lutheran, I will say. But I think you're absolutely right. She shines when she's in the room. She's a prosecutor. She knows how to handle that verbally. So,
Heather, what do you think?
I don't know. I feel like, I don't know if it was a missed opportunity. Look, I think that is, the debate is a different stage. That is insider baseball, New York elite, and it really doesn't have the same appeal. And whether the skit with
Molly Shannon
landed or not, that's what I saw on social today. I wasn't seeing clips of some of the clips from, that was the main clip I was seeing that was being shared. So maybe that's
really interesting.
I was seeing it all.
That's so interesting, right? I was in the room last night, so I'm like, we saw that clip for a second, and I didn't look on social media, and it's funny that the takeaway was her moment. That's really
that's my algorithm as well, right? That's not everybody's algorithm.
As the independent, I was seeing both of them. And the Molly Shannon thing was a dud, right? I do think she missed an opportunity to, again, go toe-to-toe with him and show that she can do just about anything. She's got the best comedy writers in the world. She would have shined. And I think one thing I will take issue with is I don't think her best moment was the debate. I think it was the convention, when she stood up and looked like the president. She was tough. She was strong. She talked about a robust military and lowering taxes. And anytime she's actually not next to him, he's completely out of the picture. She can show what the future looks like, where she is president and she is owning the stage and she is the boss.
I don't think the Al Smith dinner has any real effect. I do want to make an ancillary point. Can we stop calling it a dance party? Like, half the tracks were like opera. It was like his... He plays a Mar-a-Lago. I know this isn't your question, but I just feel like for the viewers...
Those are slow dance songs.
One-man dance party.
Like YMCA Oak.
It was a sway party. There was more swaying.
Totally fair. Let's talk, though. Her theme week next week is potentially, Man Week. And she may go on. There's a lot of talk about it. She may go on Joe Rogan.
Right.
What is your thought on this?
You know what? I think back to 2016, where people talk about white women handed Trump that election, right? And so is Kamala going after white men? Because that is who listens to Joe Rogan.
Young white men.
Young white men. It's interesting, and kind of what you were saying. I think I don't know if there's a lot of people that are undecided. I think they're either unenthused or that's it. I think. What I'm interested in the Kamala world, and Call Her Daddy is a part of that, Joe Rogan is a part of that, is can that campaign really turn, like, the TikTok memes into actual people going to the polls? And I don't know yet that yet.
I think the goal there isn't necessarily to convince Rogan listeners to go vote for Harris, as much as it is to say, you know what? She's fine, he's fine, voting's a hassle, and stay home. I think the play there is try and mute their interest in Trump by being like, well, she seems fine, and that was funny and fine, to hell with it, I'm not going to vote.
She's got to do Rogan, right? I mean, Rogan gets something like 20 times the average audience of a show on this network or CNN or everywhere else, right?
Listen, I laughed. When Donald Trump went on with Theo Vaughn, right? And they had this, like, ridiculous conversation about cocaine that I laughed at for days, but I thought, this is a disaster for Trump. It wasn't.
No, it was great.
To that audience,
it normalizes
it almost normalized it. I could hear young men being like, he's a G for that.
Yeah, which is actually...
I didn't know what a G was, but I spoke to someone to help me out.
The big problem with the Al Smith dinner is it normalizes him, right? He shouldn't be in a bow tie. He should be in handcuffs, right? And when you have him up on stage, it continues to normalize him.
But go back to the Joe Rogan, why it
Rogan
matters.
connects. Rogan moves people, and despite what you think, 60% of young people are independent, unaffiliated. They're registering to vote, and they're not picking a party. And they are many of them are voting for the first time, and they're taking it seriously. They consider themselves patriots. And Joe Rogan talks about all kinds of tough stuff. He talks about jiu-jitsu, and he talks about the military, and he connects with kind of a gut punch of America, and she needs more of that. She should go there and show she could do it.
But doesn't it silence this, right? If she doesn't show up to that room, Donald Trump fills that empty space, convincing you that she's the super woke, she's anti-male, lots of things that she's absolutely not. So at the very least, she shows up in that room and she stops that slow bleed of lies about her that's out there.
They'll still say she's not doing blank enough. It doesn't matter what she does. But I think what's really cool, and I agree, I think she should do Rogan, is he may help connect her with the uninterested voters, the one, because still hundreds of millions of people don't even vote. So maybe there's...
And he might endorse her. Like he is going to be more objective than people give him credit to. Like,
I agree.
I've been listening to Rogan from the beginning. He's not in the bag for Trump. He may give her some praise. He may actually come out of this feeling better about her and giving her audience a positive sense of him.
Has he ever endorsed anybody?
No, but he's turned on people, right? For a long time, Donald Trump thought he had Joe Rogan in his pocket. Joe Rogan might be a little guy, but he ain't in Trump's pocket. Nobody is going anywhere when we come back. Third-party candidates and the impact they could have in battleground states. That's why I was stopping these two from going at it. Saving it. And later, remembering the Trump presidency. And I want to know why some people choose to forget it. When our nightcap in the 11th hour continues. With the race tied, third-party candidates, especially in battleground states, could be the spoilers in this election. Our nightcap is still with us. You know, this isn't one of those elections where we're talking much about third-party candidates. We don't think they're out there, but they are. RFK is still on the ballot in Wisconsin. Jill Stein is still on the ballot in Pennsylvania and Michigan. Should these candidates be worried about it?
Yes. Because this may come down to a couple thousand people in Michigan, right? And if Jill Stein can capture a couple thousand people in Michigan, RFK Jr. can capture a couple thousand people in Michigan, they can upset the apple cart and determine the election. I've been covering this on my show for 3 years now, and I think people have underestimated the impact of RFK, not to win, not even to attract a majority of independents, right? He's attracting a radical, specific group of people, same kind of people that attract Jill Stein, that might be enough to tip one or two swing states. That's the threat that they present. Most independents want an alternative. They don't want RFK. They don't want Jill Stein. They are not real independents. But these people fill a void for a certain group of people. Right now, Stein's people have overtly said their objective is to beat Kamala Harris. If you want to beat Kamala Harris, you want to throw a wrench in the system, you want to protest Gaza, you want to do any number of things, Jill Stein is here for you. But most of all, they are the candidates not of independence, but of people like Putin, of Trump, and of disruption.
Samantha, what do you think?
Well, I suppose I beg the question, like, what do you do? What do you do if you're Kamala Harris or with the
You do exactly what she's doing.
Yeah.
She's revealing Jill Stein. She's running ads against Jill Stein. They're calling them out and saying, what I've been saying is, if you're a real independent, don't waste your vote. Don't fall for the trick. It's a wasted vote if you put it toward one of these people.
I'd be really focused less on the third parties, but more on the newer voters that are coming out and figuring out if they're actually voting for the parties that they want to, right? I think one of the bright spots in the early voting numbers was the amount of newly registered voters. And I think that is a beautiful bright spot. I don't necessarily share your same view that it's as dangerous as it is having the third parties on those states, but I could be wrong.
In Michigan, we know there is a large Arab-American voting base. Over 100,000 there voted uncommitted in the Democratic primary. Now, they might not be going out and voting for Donald Trump, but how concerned should VP Harris be about this group?
I think she should be concerned. I'll never forget on 2016 watching the reviews coming in. The reviews. The it's all
reviews coming in.
It's all theater. You know, watching the exact number of votes that Hillary Clinton needed to win certain states. They went to Jill Stein. They went to Gary Johnson, I think his name was.
Yep.
People who
it
know.
was.
And I have to ask, like, what is their end game? Like, she wants to hurt Kamala, but then what does she want to do? What do they want to do? I've never figured that out.
Disruptor?
Power. Some of them want power, want influence, want money. Jill Stein's a grifter.
Yeah, I was going to say, oftentimes you're in the grifter zone. When you don't know what money is behind you, you don't know what foreign powers.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question here about how both campaigns, Harris in particular, can offset those votes is by making sure she has more voters coming out who she knows are going to support her, right? New voters, yes. I mean, I'm going to draw a sort of graph here in midair, but if you look at turnout over, percentage of people who turn out by age, it sort of goes like this. You have this blip at the beginning when people are like 18, 20, it's their first election, then it goes like this, and then it goes up like that, right? And so for a long time, this end of the spectrum has been the Democratic end, where they, even if they are independents, but they are liberals mostly, and they vote for Democrats. And so that is where Democrats always had troubles getting those people out. Now, interestingly, this race actually has a lot of support for Harris at the other end of the spectrum, which is good news for her. But she still has a base of people who are less likely to turn out and vote. And so they're doing these ads targeting Stein and revealing her for who she is, but they also need to make sure they're doing everything in their power to get as many of those people who are even thinking about voting.
But when you say a base of people that are less likely to vote, Are you just saying that, like, yes, we know the die-hard MAGA fans are going to vote all day, every day, yesterday, tomorrow, and they're going to go to a rally. But just because her base is not as fervent wearing 16 hats and a flag outside their house, does that mean that her voters are less enthused or less?
No, I'm talking structurally. Structurally, it is less the case that younger people vote than older people. And their jobs make it so it's harder for them to get away. They don't run home. They move all the time. And so they have to re-register to vote, and then they forget about doing so. They're not in the habit of voting. They have less income. Like, there are all these factors that make it so that younger people are in the military and people of color are more likely. Yes, and they just don't know. They don't know what to look for.
One of the biggest Google searches for Gen Zs about voting is, what do I wear to vote?
Sure. Like, they have to wear the uniform. Exactly.
Like,
they need to know.
Really? So, yeah, I know exactly. Honestly,
you know what, question? I want to cry. Because you know what I thought she was about to say? Because I just interviewed a bunch of college students who were saying, we can't figure out what the policies are. And I thought you were about to say, no, these young people are interested, and they just don't know what the policies are.
There is, and I don't mean to be facetious, but there are a lot of new voters that it seems like such a foreign thing to them, right? They don't know the rules of voting, and this is like, they live in a digital world. They don't like, I have lots of Gen Zs that work for me, even picking up a phone call
for voting.
But they don't necessarily know that.
They're also anticipating the selfie they're going to take with that.
That's what it is. I want to look good.
Yeah.
That blows my mind. I have to ask. I know, like, people hear Donald, everything Donald Trump says goes in one ear and out the other. But this talk this week of Donald Trump talking about the enemy from within, he still does have a lot of support from law enforcement. He still does have a lot of support from people from the military. Do they hear this? Does it make an impact?
Yeah, he has a lot of support from a lot of people, but I think he's right about this being the enemy from within, but it's him.
Right.
I said this on Joy's show earlier this week. He is the #1 threat to our national security. He is what General Milley called a fascist, right? From our national security community, they have continued to identify him and what I've called the American insurgency that he's created, and the propensity for violence, the encouragement of violence, the insurrection. He is our #1 national security threat, and every national security advisor has said it. You've got General McChrystal, you've got General Milley, you've got Admiral McCraven. They have all said it, and they're kind of ringing the bell for the American public to say this is more than about politics. This is about our national security, because even if he loses, he is still a major threat to our democracy and to the integrity of this country. So he's right. It's the enemy from within, but it's him.
But your point about the police is well taken. I mean, I looked at the data, I think after the 2020 election, there was a big spike in the number of contributions from people who said they worked for police department or identified themselves as police officers or captains, lieutenants, so on and so forth, who were donating to Republicans and to Trump in particular. He's been very active about reaching out to police. He's been engaging them, and you see this response. I don't think there's been polling of police specifically, but yeah, I mean, as someone who fits within the enemies within category, apparently, since I'm a member of the mainstream media, yeah, I mean, that's not a good nexus. Right?
But after January 6th, that's what I don't understand.
But it's baked into the party, too. It's generations of the Republican Party saying we're strong on national security, we care about the police, we care about first responders. The Democrats are making up ground there, but we're talking about a generational messaging push from the Republicans, and the brand hasn't baked in.
Generational is what's key, right?
Okay.
January 6th is clearly a horrible, terrible outlier.
That's right.
But if you talk to an old school Republican and you bring up January 6th, they then turn out and bring up 17 different things that you can't even remember happened in the history of ever. And so there's some ground to make up over time. I'm not defending it, but that's where the argument comes from.
None of them are going against the U.S. government. I mean, we're talking about peaceful protests and whatnot that they might compare it to. But it's not like trying to overturn the government. I mean, guys were hurt.
For sure. All right, everybody is staying right here when we return. A reality check about the Trump presidency in the 11th hour, and the nightcap continues. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance would like you to remember the Trump presidency as a total success. Well, tonight, we've got a reality check. Here's what was happening this week every year during his administration. Back in 2017, Donald Trump is accused of disrespecting the family of a U.S. soldier killed in action. Days later, the soldier's widow said that Trump called her on the phone and struggled to remember what her husband's name was, and said her husband, quote, knew what he signed up for. Donald Trump denied these comments, saying it was a very nice call. In 2018, Donald Trump called Stormy Daniels horseface on Twitter. And by the way, just this week, our Rachel Maddow is reporting that Trump's legal team recently tried to pay Daniels to keep quiet again. In 2019, the White House announced it picked Trump's resort, Ruhle, to host the upcoming G7 summit. Trump later reversed course after facing accusations of enriching his own business. Back in 2020, in the final days of the presidential election, Donald Trump falsely claimed that the country is rounding the corner of the COVID pandemic. Of course, the deadliest weeks were still months away. That is what the Trump years were really like. Philip, I'm turning to you first because you were the one who started the conversation earlier that the majority of the country really does consider themselves independent. Why is it that so many people forget what those 4 years were like?
It's fascinating. I think there's a couple of reasons. The first is that so much of the 2020 election in particular was centered around COVID, and COVID is just not a salient issue for people anymore. So a lot of the backlash that Trump faced 4 years ago in November was based on his handling of the pandemic, which at the time was, of course, the most critical thing in everyone's mind, and it just isn't anymore. And so a lot of people sort of give him a pass. I mean, that's overly rude, honestly, but they aren't worried about his handling of the pandemic, and so he is able to just sort of call that a mulligan, to put it in terms that he'd be familiar with. That this is just a thing that happened to him. Everything was great when he was leading, and then this mystery thing appeared that he had nothing to do with, and everything went bad. That's his argument, and it's compelling to a lot of people, right? There are a lot of people who are like, yeah, things are more expensive. Biden's getting the blame for that, even though it's obviously primarily an after effect of the pandemic itself. And Trump is able to say, remember when things were cheap, wasn't that great? And it works. It compels people.
And for young voters, they literally can't remember.
They can't remember. People have short memories, too. In 2016, I ran social media at CNN, and for the first year of Trump's presidency, so I did not sleep any of those nights. And it's interesting because I think we live in a world where the vast majority of people don't really want to think about their president every day. They do not want to wake up in the morning and think about what the president tweeted or said. They want to go through their lives, have a great life, and maybe every now and again they tune into something political, right? That's what the vast majority of Americans want. And I think the short memory for a lot of people is that they don't remember that. And I think even you're seeing in some of the polls that over time they think he's mellowed or he's become less offensive and some of that is because he's less on your Twitter feed, right? Like he's less in your broadcast. Like people are making decisions, media companies, to not take the full rally anymore. So I think it slipped for a lot of people what that living through that was actually like.
What do you think, Nancy?
It's wild to hear this because I saw a tweet today somebody sent me about Trump. He's been president and our nation was fine, ! Your suckers and losers crap has been debunked. How's your bank account? Do you enjoy paying more literally for everything? I don't. And it's a perfect example. COVID,
well, I would just say to that
happened.
quick person, chances are what you have in your bank account is greater today than it was. But at the same time, yes, things are more expensive.
Right. And a lot of that has to do with the supply chain and the interruption of COVID. And like President Obama pointed out, the economy was great because he gave it to Trump.
In the first 2 years of the Trump presidency, Trump's economy was basically the same as Barack Obama's economy.
I think this is Kamala Harris's most persuasive argument. He was what I've called President Mayhem. Every day was mayhem and chaos and disruption and stress. And the entire world woke up every day to think about what crazy thing he was going to do next. That was the atmosphere for his entire presidency. And it impacted our economy. It impacted our domestic security. It impacted the global order. And I think right now is the thing she should focus on again. He is absolutely crazy. And he's volatile. And he's unstable. And that's going to be our whole country if you make him president. You may not like me, but I'll make things calm. You won't have to worry about everything. And you won't have to deal with President Mayhem every single day. That's why our allies want some stability, and the people who care about the economy especially, right? You don't want him shooting off tariffs and economic weapons, and you don't want him shooting off
There's a divide. There's a divide. When it comes to the economy, when you look at Fortune 500 CEOs that are backing him, they're looking at the broader economy, what it's going to mean for consumers, what it's going to mean for our country. When you look at business leaders who are pro-Trump, those are business leaders who know that he's a completely transactional man. And he is going to do things that serve them personally and professionally. And part of this whole tariff game isn't just, it's going to be great for American business, which it's not. Lots of people know that tariffs are the #1 way Donald Trump gets to do his favorite thing, which is pick winners and losers. business. Because you might run a business and you're going to say, Mr. President, I need to make sure I can run my business and I have no competition. He's going to say, yes, sir, I'm going to do that for you. As opposed to you were a sassy pants to me when I was running. I'm not helping you. I mean, it's his ultimate way to pick winners and losers, and I think that gets lost in this whole debate over them.
Yeah. I mean, and it helps enrich the CEOs. I'm sorry. It helps enrich them and their companies. It doesn't trickle down to their workers. They're the ones who get the money from that.
You know, it's really not that many Fortune 500 CEOs that are backing him. It's more people who run super successful people, the Bill Ackmans of the world that run a business that doesn't
people
have
who have access to him or want access to him or expect access.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
that's how fascists work. It'll be great for me personally. To hell with everybody else. It'll be great for me.
If I'm in the gaming industry, the most regulated industry out there, and I know I've got a bat phone to the White House to cut through that red tape, and I don't need to buy an NBA team to get a gaming license in Texas. I just need DJ T in my pocket. Yeah, I'm gonna give him.
Or what if you own an electric car company and the social media company, for example, right? I was just going to say about terrorists, one of the things that's fascinating is you're absolutely right in terms of him being able to pick winners and losers, but the other fascinating thing that I think is under-recognized is he uses it the exact same way he used the wall in 2016. Someone else is going to pay for it. No, actually, Americans are going to pay for it. Every time he gets mad, it gets higher, right? Like, there are all these ways. It's targeting the foreign enemies, these foreign people that are bad for America. That's who he's going after. It's the same thing. So it works not only from that perspective, but also for his base. His base eats it up. It is the wall for 2024.
All right, everybody is staying put. When we return, it is time for the MVPs of the week, and you do not want to miss them when the Nightcap continues. If you are a regular viewer, you know what time it is. It is time for our MVPs of the week. You don't have to love them. You don't have to hate them. Who had an extraordinary week? Who am I turning to first? Paul.
I am going with what I think is the most underreported political story in America, Dan Osborne. The veteran independent candidate for U.S. Senate in Nebraska is winning right now in the latest poll 50-44 against a radical GOP MAGA-supported incumbent named Deb Fischer. She's been there for 2 terms. There is no Democrat in the race. And, Phil, this is our proof of concept. If the independents have an option, they will vote for an independent. And in this race, he is leading her right now, and he may be the first true independent elected to the Senate in a long time. He's a Navy veteran, and Democrats have woken up to realize that they may not be able to take people out in some states, but independents can. And this is a story to watch.
All right, then. When you said the most underreported, I'm thinking I'm hearing like a student council run. All right, Samantha, who do you have?
Look, in a politically divided country, there's a few things that bring people together. So mine is sports-related. New York.
It sure does.
New York is having a great sports month and year where some people are looking forward to, hopefully, a Subway series. But mine is New York Liberty. It's been a banner year for the WNBA. Like, think about a couple of years ago, New York Liberty, we could barely put 1,000 people in 20 miles outside the city in the burbs. It is the hottest ticket in town in Brooklyn. Ellie the Elephant.
I was just going to say, Ellie the Elephant. You don't understand. I called Adam Silver this week. I said, let me tell you, when Ellie the Elephant is out sick, I want to fill in. Okay. They were like, are you kidding me? Ellie is the hottest thing in this town.
We had a red carpet for Glamour Women of the Year last week. We had Beyonce, we had Pamela Anderson. Do you know who everybody loved? Ellie the Elephant, came in costume. Yes. And I also love the story of Ellie because it's a Brooklyn, story where in testing the Brooklyn Bridge, they sent 25 elephants over to make sure that the people of New York understood it was safe. But the Liberty, it's the hottest thing. It's the only thing all the Glamour team want to go to.
Awesome.
Love it. Nance?
So there's a group called the Center for Common Ground, and they have a subgroup called Reclaim Our Vote. And the woman who runs that, Andrea Miller, it's a really cool organization. They get, it's grassroots, and they get volunteers to handwrite postcards to BIPOC voters that are marginalized and may not come out for the vote normally. And these handwritten cards that go to people really make an impact, telling people in a nonpartisan way, where they can register, what the voting hours are, and just encouraging people to vote and be engaged. And I think what they do is great.
That's awesome. All right, you're in bad spot. They all had great ones, so...
All right, well, let's hope. So mine is Ramiro Gonzalez, which is a name that probably not a lot of viewers are familiar with, but he is a face you're probably going to recognize. He's the gentleman who, at the Univision Town Hall, stood up and asked Donald Trump a very pointed question. I used to be a Republican. Lots of your former administration are not supporting you. I was put off by January 6th. Why should I, if Mike Pence isn't supporting you, why should I support you? And Donald Trump, who is used to having sycophantic interviewers and who is not used to having to speak to someone who he actually wants something from, in this case a vote, was just totally went off.
Befuddled.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he said that January 6th was the day of love. He said, that, he made all these various comments about, he referred to the insurrectionists as we, as opposed, who were the ones battling the police. And it was just very, very revealing about Trump, certainly, but just the context of having a normal voter ask a totally normal and rational question.
I mean, just why isn't your vice president, right? In theory, I'm just a regular voter.
And
I don't know that much.
Just like
but
blah,
the
blah,
person
blah, blah, blah.
who knows you the best, your VP, where's he at?
Right. And just as a follow-up, he says he is not going to vote for Trump.
There you go.
Wow.
All right, gang. Philip, Nancy, Paul, Samantha, this was your first visit, and I sure hope you come back. All right, thank you all so much. You at home, don't go anywhere. My MVP is next. Stick around. I am not letting you go home or go to bed or turn this off without giving you my MVP of the week because he's awesome. It is Australian golfer Stephen Alderson, the 44-year-old who goes by the nickname Spud. Well, he made history this week as the first player with autism to win a G4D Tour event. I don't really follow a lot of golf, but it's what he said after winning that got to me. Please watch this.
Just growing up as a kid, just being bullied all the time at school and even bullied at other golf clubs. It just means the world. So awesome.
Spud's win is a reminder to everybody out there that what other people think of you, what other people say about you, it is none of your business. Believe in yourself and put in the work, and dreams really do come true. Just look at Spud. And on that absolutely awesome note, I wish you all a fantastic night. And remember, if you're not busy tomorrow night, you can get to the Nightcap again on Saturdays at 11 p.m. Eastern right here on MSNBC. And tomorrow, MSNBC Films presents My Generation, the 4-part documentary series from NBC News Studios that looks at how cultural and political events shaped 4 generations. This week, it's all about millennials. Samantha will know all about that. And it's narrated by Kristen Bell, who I'm already obsessed with because I think Nobody Wants This is like the greatest show I've ever seen. I've watched the season twice already. I might watch it a 3rd time. But now you can see her narrating this documentary, and you definitely should. You can see that all-new episode of My Generation tomorrow at 9 p.m. Eastern right here. But for now, from all of our colleagues across the networks of NBC News, thank you for staying up late with me.